Read and hear more about important news and policy issues at ncpolicywatch.com. This is News and Views with Chris Fitzsimon.
Welcome to another edition of News and Views. Thanks for joining us. This was a big week in Washington and Raleigh. President Obama outlined his agenda in his State of the Union speech to Congress Tuesday, and the North Carolina General Assembly convened the 2011 session in Raleigh on Wednesday. North Carolina Congressman David Price joins us now to talk about the president's address and efforts by Republicans to abolish the widely supported public finance system for presidential candidates. Well, Congressman Price, thanks for being with us. We know you're busy and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, let's start with your reaction to President Obama's State of the Union address this week. First, your overall thoughts.
It was a powerful speech and was given, of course, at a time of somber reflection, given the shootings in Tucson and the need, I think, that is very widely felt for a new seriousness and mutual respect, civility in discussing the challenges facing our country.
I want to get your thoughts on a couple of specifics that have, made the headlines. The story a lot of people are reporting about the speech is the president's proposal to freeze annual domestic spending for the next 5 years. Can we do that? Should we do it?
It is a proposal that I think will receive serious consideration here. We all know that no aspect of the budget, even our favorite aspects, is off the table. But by the same token, this is the favorite Republican target, domestic discretionary spending, appropriated spending each year, and that applies to domestic purposes. And that's, by some measures, 12% of the budget, certainly no more than 17%, depending on what kind of items you count as being domestic spending. It's a fraction of the budget, and you could wipe it out entirely and not address our budget challenges. So the president, I suppose, sees this as a gesture, as a good faith gesture. But those who understand the budget are going to need to come up with their own proposals for other aspects of the budget. What about defense spending? And of course, the president indicated he wants economies there too. What about our entitlements? And what about the tax code? What about the wisdom of extending the Bush-era tax breaks, which mainly benefited the wealthy in the first place? What about continuing those indefinitely? Can we afford that?
I'm glad you raised the tax cuts or extending the Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest, 1.5% to 2% of Americans. Obviously, that's something the Republicans don't agree with, but there are folks, I'm sure you know, in the progressive community in North Carolina who can't figure out if the deficit is such a problem, why the folks who are now in the majority would want to keep giving tax cuts to the wealthiest folks in the country, which would add to the deficit.
Well, it's a very good question. I didn't want to do this ever, and the president didn't either. There was a compromise reached in December, which did let us continue unemployment benefits, which should be a no-brainer. That's the most it's the most just in terms of who needs the money, but it's also a great economic stimulus to put money in the hands of people who will immediately spend it on the necessities of life. You know, it let us continue the unemployment benefits. It let us continue middle-class tax breaks. It gave us some relief on the payroll tax, which is probably, I hate to say this, but it may be the last best counter-cyclical effort we are able to make in terms of getting the economy back, keeping the recovery going. All of that was part of an overall bargain. It also, as it turned out, let us get the START treaty in the Senate and Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal. So the overall package had a lot of good things in it, but one of those was certainly not the continuation of these tax breaks for millionaires, and for that matter, this ridiculous thing for the benefit of a few thousand families with respect to cutting the estate tax. Those things were just giveaways, and they were very, very hard to swallow, even as part of an overall package. And the president made clear that this is not off the table. That as we go forward, we're still going to have to look at the tax code, and that's the first thing, in my opinion, we should be looking at.
One thing I was going to ask you about, you mentioned the need for innovation and the president's call for higher education and the need for people to have high skills. I'm sure you know the General Assembly in North Carolina convenes with the Republicans who are now in control, talking about massive cuts to the public infrastructure, and especially the university system in many quarters. It seems like we're going to be struggling to fulfill the president's wishes here in North Carolina, given our budget situation.
Absolutely. that's something that has the potential, I think, to really disrupt the kind of advances that the president's talking about. You know, you don't want to cancel out at the state level what you're achieving at the federal level. That's true in terms of the economic recovery, and it's true with respect to specific policy advances like the one you're describing, our education commitments. My own view is that the need for attention to the dilemma in the states and to state budgets and to possible support for state budgets, that need is not over here. Now, our new Republican leadership has said that it's over. They've said they're just simply unwilling to look at this. I don't know if that could change or not, but I think it's an uphill fight. Our states are largely on their own. So we have plenty of things to focus on in North Carolina to make sure that we minimize the damage there. But your premise is absolutely right. The potential of financial difficulties, even collapse in some of our states, is a great storm cloud on the horizon that could greatly affect the kind of vision the president put forward.
And finally, I wanted to ask you about an issue I know you've worked on for a long time and are continuing to work on, which is the public financing of our campaigns to give people without access to a lot of wealth the opportunity to participate in the political process. You're trying to modernize and improve the system. The Republicans want to do away with it.
It is really, really a betrayal, I think, of just to start with the process here. You know, 3 weeks ago when these guys took charge, they pledged openness, they pledged careful deliberation, they pledged to restore the process of committee deliberation. I mean, their premise was, of course, that Democrats had that they could do better than Democrats had in this regard, and then this is what we get: no hearings, no markups, no deliberations, just a summary repeal of really the flagship effort of getting big money, big corporate money out of politics in this country. This was a post-Watergate enactment. It has worked extremely well. Every Democratic and Republican presidential candidate since then, since 1976, has utilized these matching funds and then public funds, the checkoff funds, to finance their general election campaign. The only exception is Barack Obama, and that's a regrettable exception. Now, what this underscores, I think, this current situation we're in, the system does need to be modernized, and I have legislation. We introduced it in the last Congress as bipartisan legislation to modernize the system, to bring it into line with the amount of money required for modern campaigns, to extend the season to accommodate the earlier primary calendar, and so forth. There do need to be adjustments so that presidential candidates will once again know that they can benefit from participating in this. The notion that you would just come in under the pretext of saving money, they're using this as an excuse to wipe out any kind of public funding of campaigns and simply to open up the floodgates once again to corporate funding and big money donors being sought by all these presidential candidates. I said to them yesterday, this flies in the face of the positive history of presidential public financing. It flies in the face of Republican support of this until this new Tea Party bunch came in. This is a Watergate reform which they are ready to throw overboard.
Well, Congressman Price, I hope that doesn't happen, and we really appreciate your time. And thanks for what you're doing in Washington. Thanks for being with us.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Good to talk to you.
Up next, what state budget cuts could mean for public schools.